Chapter 3. In Quest of a Solution. It was 5:30 before Holmes returned. He was bright, eager, and in excellent spirits, a mood which, in this case, alternated with fits of the blackest depression. "There's no great mystery in this matter," he said, taking a cup of tea which I had poured out for him. "The facts appear to admit of only one explanation." "What? Have you solved it already?" "Well, that is too much to say. I have discovered a suggestive fact, that is all. It is, however, very suggestive. The details are still to be added. I have just found, on consulting the back files of the Times, that Major Sholto, of Upper Norwood, late of the 34th Bombay Industry, died upon the 28th of April in 1882. I may be very obtuse, Holmes, but I fail to see what that suggests." "No? You surprise me. Look at it in this way. Then Captain Morstan disappears. The only person in London whom he could have visited is Major Sholto. Major Sholto denies having heard that he was in London. 4 years later, Sholto dies. Within a week of his Captain Morton's death, daughter receives a valuable present, which is repeated from year to year, now accumulates in a letter which describes her as a wronged woman. What wrong can it refer to except this deprivation of her father? And why should the presents begin immediately after Sholto's death? Unless it is that Sholto's heir knows something of the mystery and desires to make compensation. Have you any alternative theory which would meet these facts?" "But what a strange compensation! How strangely made! Why, too, should he write a letter now rather than 6 years ago? Again, the letter speaks of giving her justice. What justice can she have now? It is too much to suppose that her father is still alive, that there is no other injustice in her case that you know of." "There are difficulties. There are certainly difficulties," said Sherlock Holmes pensively. "But your expedition of tonight will solve them all. Here is a four-wheeler, and Miss Morstan inside. Are you all ready? Then we had better go down, for it is a little past the hour." I picked up my hat and my heaviest stick, but observed that Holmes took his revolver from his drawer and slipped it into his pocket. It was clear that he thought our night's work might be a serious one. Miss Morstan was muffled in a dark cloak, and her sensitive face was composed, but pale. She must have been more than a woman if she did not feel some uneasiness in the strange enterprise upon which we were embarking. Yet her self-control was perfect, and she readily answered the few additional questions which Sherlock Holmes put to her. "Major Sholto was a very particular friend of Papa's," she said. "His letters were very full of allusions to the Major. He and Papa were in command of the troops of Andaman Islands, so they were thrown a great deal together. By the way, a curious paper was found in Papa's desk which no one could understand. I don't suppose that it is of the slightest importance, but I thought you might care to see it. So I brought it with me. It is here." Holmes unfolded the paper carefully and smoothed it out upon his knee. Then he very methodically examined it all over with his double lens. "It is paper of native Indian manufacture," he remarked. "It has some time been pinned to a board. The diagram upon it appears to be a plan of part of a larger building of numerous halls, corridors, and passages. At one point it is a small cross with red ink, and above it is 337 from left. It's faded in pencil writing. In the left-hand corner is a curious hieroglyph, like 4 crosses in a line, with their arms touching beside it. Beside it is written in very rough and coarse letters, 'The Sign of the Four. Jonathan Small, Mammoth Sign, Abdullah Khan, and Dost Akbar.' Now I confess that I do not see how this bears upon the matter. It is evidently a document of importance. It has been kept carefully in a pocket-book, for one side is as clean as the other. It was in his pocketbook that I found it. Preserve it carefully, then, Miss Morstan, for it may prove to be of use to us. I begin to suspect that the matter may turn out to be much deeper and more subtle than I had at first supposed. I must reconsider the idea. He leaned back in the cab, and I could see by his drawn brow and vacant eye that he was thinking intently. Miss Morstan and I chatted in an undertone about our present expedition and its possible outcome, but our companion maintained his impenetrable reserve until the end of our journey. It was a September evening, and not yet 7 o'clock, but the day had been a dreary one, and a dense, drizzly fog lay upon the great city. Mud-colored clouds drooped sadly over the muddy streets. Down in the strand of lights, but were simply splotches of diffused light, which threw a feeble circular glimmer upon the slimy pavement. The yellow glare from the shop windows streamed out into the steamy, vaporous air, then threw a murky, shifting radiance across the crowded thoroughfare. There was, to my mind, something eerie and ghost-like in the endless procession of faces which flitted across the narrow bars of light. Sad faces and glad, haggard and merry. Like all humankind, they flitted from the gloom into the light, and so back into the gloom once more. I am not subject to impressions, but the dull, heavy evening with the strange business upon which we were engaged combined to make me nervous and depressed. I could see from Miss Morstan's manner that she was suffering from the same feelings. Holmes alone could rise superior to petty influences. He held his open notebook upon his knee, and from time to time he jotted down figures and memoranda in the light of his pocket lantern. At the Lyceum Theatre, the crowds were already there thick as the side entrances. In front, a continuous stream of hansoms and four-wheelers were rattling up, discharging their cargoes of shirt-fronted men and bediamonded women. We had hardly reached the third pillar, which was our rendezvous, before a small, dark, brisk man in the dress of a coachman accosted us. "Are you the parties who come with Miss Morstan?" he asked. "I am Miss Morstan, and these two gentlemen are my friends," she said. He bent a pair of wonderfully penetrating and questioning eyes upon us. "You'll excuse me, miss," he said, with a certain dogged manner, "but I was asked you to give me your word that neither of your companions is a police officer." "I give you my word on that," she answered. He gave a shrill whistle, on which the street Arab led across the four-wheeler and opened the door. The man who had addressed us mounted to the box, while we took our places inside. We had hardly done so before the driver whipped up his horse, and we plunged away at a furious pace through the foggy streets. The situation was a curious one. We were driving to an unknown place on an unknown errand. Yet our invitation was neither a complex host, which was an inconceivable hypothesis, or else we had a good reason to think that the important issues might hang upon our journey. Miss Morstan's demeanor was as resolute and collected as ever. I endeavored to cheer and amuse her by reminiscences of my adventures in Afghanistan, but, to tell the truth, I was myself too excited in their own situation, and so curious as to our destination that my stories were slightly involved. To this day she declares that I told her one moving anecdote as to how a musket looked into my tent at the dead of night, and how I fired a double-barreled tiger cub at it. At first I had some idea as to the direction in which we were driving, but soon, with our pace, the fog, and my own limited knowledge of London, I lost my bearings and knew nothing, save that we seemed to be going a very long way. Sherlock Holmes was never at fault, however, and he muttered the names of the cab rattled through the squares in and out of the tortuous by streets. Rochester Row, he said. Now Vincent Square. Now we have come out of the Vauxhall Bridge Road. We're making for the Surrey side, apparently. Yes, I thought so. Now we are on the bridge. You can catch a glimpses of the river. We did indeed get a fleeting view of the stretch of the Thames, with the lamp shining upon the broad, silent river. But our cab dashed on, and was soon involved in a labyrinth of streets upon the other side. Wandsworth Road, said my companion. Priory Road, Larkham Lane, Stockwell Place, Robert Street, Cold Harbour Lane. Our guest does not appear to take us very fashionable regions. We had indeed reached a questionable and forbidding neighborhood. Long lines of dull brick houses were only received by the coarse glare of the tawdry brilliance of public houses at the corners. Then came rows of two-storied villas, each with a fronting of miniature garden, and then again interminable lines of new, staring brick buildings. The monster tentacles of the giant city were throwing out to the new country. At last the cab drew up to the third house at a new terrace. None of the other houses were inhabited, and that at which we stopped was as dark as its neighbors, save for a single glimmer in the kitchen window. On our knocking, however, the door was instantly thrown open by a Hindu servant, clad in the yellow turban, white, loose-fitting clothes, and a yellow sash. There was something strangely incongruous in this oriental figure framed in the commonplace doorway of a third-rate suburban dwelling home. "The Sahab waits for you," he said. Spoken even there came a high, piping voice from the inner room. "Show them in to me, Kit Murstra," he cried. "Show them straight in to me."